Hello folks, this is Ben from Drunken and I work with people one-on-one doing cool sort of somatic healing stuff. And in this video, I wanted to share a little bit about what I mean by that and how I kind of work and approach this and work with people. So at the highest level, you could say what I'm trying to help people with is to live life in a way that is fully engaged, that's very authentic and that's spontaneous and natural, sort of going with the flow of life, feeling connected to ourselves and to life itself. Because I found that in my experience and in the experience of many other people, that's not always the case. We're living life from a place of struggle. It feels like a constant effort. There's a lot of fear in the system that's coloring how we perceive life and ourselves. And as a result, we feel like we constantly need to be in control, that we're constantly managing other people's emotions and their opinions of us. We're constantly hiding things about ourselves and sort of trying to present ourselves in a certain light. We find it very difficult to be vulnerable with other people because we're afraid that we'll get rejected in some way. And all of this requires a huge amount of planning, control, trying to anticipate, project, and so on. And so we're coming at life from this place of struggle, fear, and inauthenticity. It's a lot of effort. It's very painful. And so I try to help people to work through the blocks, the frozen emotion, the stuck feelings, those really rigid survival responses, those painful unconscious beliefs, those projections we put onto other people in the world, all that stuff. I try and help people work through that to safely bring it up and integrate it and process it. Because when that happens, then there's a great relaxation in the system and we can start to live life from a more spontaneous and natural place, which feels much more right, much more coherent. It feels much more ourselves. It's happier and more joyful. That's kind of the vibe. And very briefly in my own journey, I used to be an alcoholic in my 20s, and then I sort of hit the end of the road on that one, and then started on my kind of a quest to figure out what the hell was going on and if I could be happy and joyful and live in that way, right? And so I started with meditation and things like that, but it wasn't until I found this somatic work and I started working through the layers. First there was all this sadness coming up, just crying and crying. Then there's lots of shame that I found in my system. Tons of repressed anger that I was totally surprised by, a lot of anxiety and fear, just all of it pent up in the body. And it was through my own experiences of working through that I've really sort of laid that foundation of knowledge and experience that I try to bring to other people, right? And the transformation in my own life, I put in a lot of effort, I put in a lot of time, but it's like nothing I could have imagined. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. If someone gave me $1 billion in exchange for what I've learned through this process, I would laugh in their face. It would be the most ridiculous, paltry offer imaginable. So what do I do in a session? You could say there's two main parts to it, right? So what we're doing here is, as we've gone through life, the reason we've accumulated all these blocks and all this fear is because we've never been taught or supported to really process and integrate our emotions and nervous system responses adequately, right? So when there's fear, the fight or flight response, there's shame coming up, anger and so on. Often we're forced to push these things down because the hurt is too painful, is too much for us to handle by ourselves, or because, anger or fear is coming up and our parents don't allow us or, to express it. We have to push it down. If you're afraid at school, you can't just say, oh, miss, I'm really afraid. It's not cool. It doesn't feel safe to do so. So again, you have to pretend you're not afraid. We push all these parts of us down into the system. So over time, we're accumulating all these emotional tensions, these survival stresses in the body, which generates a huge amount of pain. And we see the world through this lens of all these repressed emotions. So we see the world through the lens of fear and anger and shame, right? And then we have this sense of us being unworthy, other people being, judging us, and the world is very scary. This is all a reflection of our internal world, right? And when the world appears that way, of course we have to try and control it and manage ourselves, right? It's not safe to do otherwise. So what we're doing in a session is really trying to find a safe and compassionate way of bringing up these parts of ourselves that we have abandoned, have pushed down, pushed away into our unconscious, and then to integrate them and process them. So what I do is in sort of the first part is developing a sense of safety in your experience. I call this resourcing. So that's an idea by Stephen Porges, a trauma therapist. He calls it creating an island of safety in your experience. Because the nervous system's only going to open up if there's a certain amount of, if you're able to stay with the body safely, right? So I have different techniques that I use to help people to sort of regulate their nervous system, to come into the body and to start to gain access to those emotions in a way that feels manageable. Then the second part is where we invite in some of that more difficult material, right? So I help people to bring up certain triggers, certain emotions, and I facilitate, I guide them through the process using different questions and techniques and inquiries to work through the layers and to get to kind of what the root issue is. So for example, if you have some thought of like your boss said something to you last week, you know, at the surface, it might be like, oh, my boss said the work I did wasn't very good. That's really stressing me out. But if you start asking questions, well, what does it mean about you that your boss said your work isn't good? It's like, well, that means I'm a terrible employee. It's like, and what's the identity, you know, at the core of that? What does it mean about you that you're a bad employee? Well, I'm worthless. I'm gonna lose my job and be on the streets and die alone. It's gonna be horrible. It's like, okay, well, where do you feel that in the body? So maybe you feel that tightness in the chest at the prospect of losing your job and being on the streets. And it's like, when did you first ever feel that feeling? Is there some memory of when that occurred? You might go back to childhood, might be some experience with your father or mother. And then you realize that at the root, it's like, it's just fear of being abandoned by your father or your mother or something like that, right? Needing their approval. And this is not to try and work out intellectually what's going on. This is as you get closer to that sense of needing your father's love, for example, like that's a portal to the body. It's a portal to these painful parts of ourselves. And I then might help someone work through, you know, when that pain comes up. I have different techniques that I use to help people be very consciously with that pain, to communicate with it, to help it move. I tend to use the body quite a lot, more than other facilitators. I get people standing up, moving around, teaching them and helping them to use their body to channel these emotions. So they're no longer frozen and stuck, they're actually able to move. And it's when that emotion is able to move that it's able to release and relax and let go. Because all these parts of ourselves, they really want to be seen, acknowledged and felt and allowed fully. Right? So if you think about like a 3-year-old, how does a 3-year-old experience anger or sadness or fear? It's quite a full-on experience, right? Whereas if you think about how like a 50-year-old, a quite repressed 50-year-old man, for example, if you think about how, just imagine some cliched person like that, how he experiences emotions, very different, very tight, everything's locked down, right? And we want to kind of loosen that up a bit and get things flowing. And that's where that spontaneity and naturalness of life starts going. And I do this in as safe and compassionate a way as is possible. You know, it's all just taken step by step, just really staying as attuned with the client as possible, for feeling into what's intuitively the best next move, and trying to stay in. There's a sweet spot between things being too much, too overwhelming, or not going into things quite enough, you know, keeping things still trapped in the body. I try to sort of walk that line, but I also do so in quite a direct way. So I'm it's not talk therapy. It's not sort of chatting about what happened in the past and figuring it out intellectually. We use the mind only as a portal into the body to just get to the root of these feelings, of that core fear or hurt or anger or whatever it is, and then just being really compassionate and gentle with those layers, with these parts of ourselves, to help them come up, be felt, and be integrated and processed. And I think that'll do for now. So any questions, just you can find my email on my website. Just shoot me a note. And yeah, I work with folks one-on-one. So if you're interested, give me a shout. You can book a free and friendly chat with me on my website. Hope to hear from you soon. Peace.